Hello, and welcome back to Practically Political. I'm Dave Spencer, and I'm joined as always by my two partners in crime, Kurt Bardella and Ashley Davis. It is Wednesday, June 18th, and as always, not a dearth of things to talk about, folks. So probably the biggest news is the Iran-Israeli conflict, and it's very interesting because Israel is taking advantage of Iran, who is, to put it mildly, been quite weakened. It seems like they're flying over Tehran the way they could fly over Tel Aviv. There's just no air defenses at all. I think Iran will soon exhaust their supply of ballistic missiles, though I think we should say that 10 to 15% of them are getting through the so-called Iron Dome. But before I get your thoughts on it, let me just set it up a little bit. It really seems like the president is having his cake and eating it too right now, because the two wings of MAGA, one, the Tucker Carlsons of the world who think it's traitorous if the U.S. gets involved, and the other wing saying, we got to take Iran out, we got to pull the root out. But right now he's walking that wonderful line where someone else is doing it, but he can take credit for it. But you saw a lot of the saber rattling, or you heard a lot of the saber rattling over the weekend in terms of threats and unrest and all that. So I would just love to get both of your takes on it, because this is going to be a very important foreign policy thing. And I think it has a chance to reshape the whole Middle East. But of course, it does remind me a little bit of 2003. And I think we're naive when we think we should topple a malignant regime, which this one most certainly is. But we don't really have a plan for what's going to come next. And I don't know what really is going to come next. It could be worse, but certainly not for the women of Iran, but for the status in the Middle East. But anyway, what say you? Why don't we start with you? Why don't we start with Ashley?
Sure. Well, one thing I really think is important about all of this is all of us and everyone watching, we have no idea what's really being talked about in the Situation Room, right? We have the information that is publicly available to us. I know we all are following this very close, but some of the things I have heard that are obviously not classified anymore are, just how close Iran really was. I've heard hours, I've heard days in regards to having the nuclear weapon. And the strike took me 100% by surprise, even though the 60 days, I mean, how many times have you heard 60 days, not just with this administration, but with every modern administration about, a country in the Middle East? But for them to have that type of attack that quickly, obviously it's been planned for years, but there was an urgency. And I actually feel that it has spooked a lot of people in our government. And that's not a political statement. I just think that it was a very, very serious situation. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, are we going to use our bunker buster bombs or not? Are we going to let Israel shoot them if there are bombs, so we're not actually part of the war? I mean, I don't know. I think, what did the president give? 24, 48 hours for them to resign?
Okay.
So
I don't think that's going to happen. Obviously, the president is like it because it's, he's been pressured. He's hoping would put pressure on them to want to come to the table. But just to react a little bit to a couple of things you said, and first is this idea about the intelligence, because the Israelis, and again, let's go back to 2003 when Dick Cheney was talking about mushroom clouds, and then we never found any weapons of mass destruction. Our own intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was testifying, and she said our intelligence is not showing that Iran was close to breaking out, was not showing that they were pursuing a nuclear weapon as nearly as aggressively as Israeli intelligence says. And frankly, I believe that. I always think that Iran was looking for the leverage that having a nuclear weapon would give them, more than they were actually trying to get a nuclear weapon, because they may be unpredictable, but they're not crazy. And the other point you raised, which is a really good one, is the bunker busting bombs, because if we want to get to their nuclear facilities, which some people are saying are half kilometer or even a kilometer underground, they need our bunker busting bombs. They can't do it on their own. And the whole point is that they want to really knock out the regime. They want to pull the root out, so to speak, because if any of it is left, it might be like a cancer. It could regenerate. But please go on.
Yeah, I mean, as in general, I understand, and obviously we had issues with our intelligence in 2003. I mean, a lot of that was the British intelligence, but ours too. But I also think that do we have enough? Did we have the same intelligence that the Israelis did? I know, obviously, Tulsi Gabbard, I think, is not in favor of what's happening, and she's kind of out of favor in this administration. So, that's going to be something to watch moving forward in general. But I think this whole thing sets up, and I think I said this before on one of our shows, is this fever of Middle East and hatred to Israelis, hatred to America. I it reminds me of 9/11 time period again. For the first time I've felt it, and since 25 years ago. I just think that there's so much hatred for us that it makes me extremely nervous for our troops, our embassies around the world, but also in the US. So I just don't like it. I don't like the feeling. And you know, I don't think there's anything good that comes out of this, but we have to destroy this. I mean, I'm hawkish, so I think that we have to deal with some of these issues.
What say you, Kurt?
I think that we have no business at this moment in time getting involved in any type of military conflict in the Middle East. We just barely have extricated ourselves from what began in the aftermath of 9/11. We have shown over and over again that we are woefully inadequate on this front. That the happy talk that I hear from Magdalene, that, oh, we're just going to do some precise strikes, get out, and it'll be all fine. Like that is just
Never heard that before.
Our history completely betrays that fanciful notion that whatever we do from a military standpoint will not have long-term, long-lasting implications. We don't know what we're doing, and we don't have a plan, and we certainly don't have a realistic plan that the American people would buy off on, that would keep us engaged over a long period of time. That is not what the bill of goods that the American people bought off on in November, at least when they voted. It was a promise to not be involved in major military conflicts. In fact, that we would have peace everywhere, and every conflict would end, and everyone would be too scared of Donald Trump to even instigate any type of conflict. And we're seeing quite the opposite right now. The world before our very eyes is becoming more volatile, more violent, and there's kind of a zero-sum game being played out right now. And if we get drawn into that, and provide military support, provide military assets, military aircraft, weapons, we are, whether we say it or not overtly, engaging in warfare. And I just don't think the appetite exists right now for the American people. While they look at gas prices will be going up, when they look at the cost of goods and services have gone up in the wake of tariffs, when they look at the economic uncertainty surrounding just everything going on here at home, I don't think the appetite is there to be the world's policeman in any way. Even if it is, right, yes, we should take out Iran's nuclear capabilities. Even if you agree with that premise, I don't think that the appetite exists right now with the current condition of our country, when they see chaos unfolding every time they turn on TV, whether it's through tariffs, whether it's through the immigration rates going on right now. Obviously, our standing amongst the global community is up and down, as this country has been up and down with our policies and the inconsistencies. It's like, I can't think of a worse time right now for us to begin to engage in any type of military conflict, when there's so much unrest and instability going on just in our own backyard.
I think that does prove the point. Then we should do the same for Ukraine. Like, we shouldn't be if we don't do it for Israel, then we shouldn't do it for Ukraine. I mean, it's the same conversation, I think, is what you're saying, is the country doesn't want to be involved in any more wars, hence Ukraine, when the election was happening. So stay out of this one as well. I mean, there's an argument. My thing always is my training in national security and stuff that I knew that the rest of the world didn't know. And when people like us were out there talking about, post 9/11 stuff, and I was like, they don't have no idea what they're talking about because they don't have the intelligence that I do. I just don't know what that is. What do they know that we don't?
Well, I think it's important to say that Iran and Ukraine are apples and oranges in the sense that we do have a very strategic interest in making sure that Putin fails in Ukraine, because if he succeeds in Ukraine, he's not going to stop. I think people both inside his world and outside of his world will conclude that. And what we've done so far very well is we've been able to finance their defense, though Biden talked about things, but he pussyfooted to getting them a lot of weapons when he should have. But putting that aside, I think we've done overall a pretty good job. I'd give us a B plus in terms of being able to fund them. And Putin's also made some mistakes, and Ukraine has proved much more resilient. But Iran is a different animal. Obviously, we're worried about unrest in the Middle East, but going along with what you say, what worries me is that it just takes one stray missile that hits something close to U.S. troops or anything that's considered aggressive towards us, and then we're sucked in. And that, to me, is the real danger. I think that has a much smaller chance of happening in Ukraine than it does in Iran.
I agree with that for sure.
So I think,
yeah, I mean, this thing is like right at the point of a spark. Like if there's one spark,
yep,
it's going to be utter chaos.
I also got to say, like, I am deeply concerned about the prospect of this president in any way assuming wartime powers. I look at the way that he's using the office right now, to impose his will and to deploy military assets on American soil. It's like, you make him a wartime president, I promise you, I guarantee you, he will not leave office in 2028 if we are in, quote, a war of any kind.
Well, I think he will try not to leave office. I'm still, maybe I'm naively optimistic that our democracy will hold in that front. But that was a perfect segue, Kurt, to the next topic, and that's the whole immigration issue. Because when you look back on history, there have been so few times that the National Guard has been called in. The last time was in 1992. And again, you talk about apples and oranges, because that was after the Rodney King verdict. And that's where a lot of people in LA, frankly, didn't trust the police, right? So, and there were riots, and they weren't necessarily partisan. They weren't anything to do with issues that people agreed or disagreed on. So this is playing with fire here. And just on top of that, troops they're trained to kill. They're not trained to police our citizens. They don't put handcuffs on people. They don't know how to read people their Miranda rights. And it's clear the president is just looking for an excuse, right? He's looking again for a spark. He's looking for something to go out of control where he has an excuse to start using the military on his own citizens. And that, if that is a Rubicon, that if we cross that one, we're in a whole new ballpark here. The good news is that except for some sophomoric stuff like burning Waymos on the first few nights, the results and the riots and the demonstrations have been mostly peaceful. And I think people understand, just look at any kind of history, peaceful demonstrations work. Violent ones do not. Trump is looking for a violent reaction. So let's hope it stays on. But what are your thoughts on the state of the immigration thing and this brazen overriding of local governors' desires on the National Guard and actually deploying Marines to patrol their own citizens?
I thought the Marines, though, never were latest for training. They never actually went on the streets.
Well, they're there.
Are they? I'm out of the country, boys, but I mean, I'm only for 3 days. But I mean, I saw Karen the mayor lifted the curfew. So but are the Marines still training there? Or are they home?
They have not been recalled back from there yet.
Correct.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know that. Listen, I think, I watched this just from a purely non-political view. I watched how Governor Abbott called up his National Guard. Newsom obviously didn't. I mean, listen, what do you guys think as Democrats? Newsom had his 2 minutes of fame. I think it's over for the most part. I mean, I think that his Israel happening took the wind out of the sails of what was happening. I think this could have gotten a lot worse. I think that, people could have continued to protest. And as you guys know, this isn't the peaceful protesters that matter. It's the ones that are the hired ones that don't even care about the issues, that are looting and whatever. That, like you said, Dave, it didn't get to that, thank goodness. But I also think because the American people and the media stopped paying attention to that and started paying attention to Israel, it kind of took all the wind out of everyone's sails. But
Yeah.
do you guys think that I mean, we can debate back and forth about if the National Guard being called up. I do not think the Marines needed to be called up. National Guard doesn't bother me as much. And I think they were holding them. They weren't arresting them until the police could arrest them if people did anything wrong. But still, it's still optics, and I get it. It's a very difficult conversation, but I did Bass and Newsom get more popular or less popular over this?
Newsom got more popular in the Democratic Party, I would say. And that's all he cares about right now because he's positioning for the Democratic primary in 2028. Bass, I think, is just has been a disaster of a mayor, like well before this, and so I just think that like her political fortunes are completely divorced from Newsom's. In my opinion, she just looks, like a terrible mayor who just has no control over her city on a myriad of issues, not just this one. It feels like it's been one blunder after the other for her. I think that it feels like that this president is looking for any opportunity to escalate
Right.
and provoke.
Yeah.
And I don't think that military assets should be used that way to unnecessarily escalate situations. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, like, oh, this is going to be horrible. There's going to be violence. I'm going to send, a presence there that will likely increase the violence, the opportunity for violence, and therefore it is justified. It's like the whole point of law enforcement is actually first at the local level to de-escalate conflict, not escalate. That is what they are supposed to be taught. Is that the goal isn't to come in guns blazing, but to try to get things to resolve in a non-violent way before you have to escalate. That's what the community policing actually is supposed to be. I think that when you get to a point where you have agents who are willfully not identifying themselves and taking matters into their own hands, when an elected official just says, like, can you show me a warrant, and then they end up dragging him out of there. Like, I think that we're crossing lines that while you might agree Republican land, not you, Ashley, but Republican land with, yes, this is the right way to do this and we should stand up and they're just trying to enforce the law. It's like, well, I can't help but think about January 6th when, people were putting their hands on law enforcement, and you call those people, not you, Ashley, Republicans call those people patriots, and they got pardoned. It's like, you can't say that you're the party of law and order and be okay with what happened on January 6th. It is completely contrarian to me. And if you're okay with the president of the United States deploying a National Guard into your state and the Marines into your state to enforce the law, you better be okay if a Democrat president sends the military into a red state to, quote, enforce the law as he or she sees fit. Like, if you're not okay with the latter, you can't be okay with the former.
Yeah,
Well,
no, I think that's
yeah,
right.
I would. The double standards are a hallmark of Donald Trump, and that's what's so frustrating. Being a Rockefeller Republican is that it seems like I'm always at odds. If I was talking to a friend of mine, and 10 years ago, we agreed on everything except abortion. I've always been pro-choice, and the death penalty, I used to be for it, now I'm against it. But other than that, we were on target with everything. But so, as to paraphrase Ronald Reagan, I didn't leave the Republican Party. The Republican Party left me. So I almost wish I didn't have to be so critical. But as far as the Dems go, I think Karen Bass is done. There is nothing that will permanently destroy the reputation of a politician than not responding to a disaster effectively. To me, that's the one line that you cannot cross. She was already not doing very well, and then she went over to where was it, Ghana, to some inauguration when she knew that they told her the fires were coming. It was just a fiasco in every sense. Gavin Newsom, I don't think after Kamala in the next election, a California Democrat, I guess that's redundant these days, someone from California can be elected. I just don't think it's going to happen. So I think Gavin is a very skilled politician, our governor, but I also think that he says what's convenient at the time. He's already backtracking on things like the trans issue. And I think after having a weak politician like Kamala, I just don't think that very many people are going to buy it. So he's done some good things, but overall, I would tell him to save his powder. But it's going to be very interesting to see what happens if LA can rebuild. I think the best thing LA has going for it, frankly, is the 28 Olympics.
Yes.
The whole
It
world
has
is
to rebuild.
seeing
Yeah.
them, and it's a great incentive. And who knows, fingers crossed, who's ever elected the next governor, be it Kamala or someone else, might, here's a concept, reduce regulations so things can actually be approved more quickly and built more efficiently. I know that goes against the California ethos these days, but hope springs eternal.
I think the Democrat candidate has to, or the next governor has to run on that regulation reform and I think people are ready for that. You see how many companies are leaving California because of that and taxes. So, and LA is going to be super helpful for them.
Yes, I think it'll be great. So let's move on to B cubed. First, we had Build Back Better. Now we have the big, beautiful bill, which of course I call the big budget buster. And I guess the latest thing is now that the Senate, he wants it approved, by the August recess. I think these timelines are malleable, to put it mildly. And of course, you have some people in the Senate that are the Ron Johnsons, the Rand Pauls that are pushing back. Forgive me for being a little cynical here, but every time the Senate has made noises about having a spine, they've disappointed me in every way. And I think that look at the nominees, they were going to stand up to them. I think it's so bad that I also believe that Matt Gaetz, had he stayed in, would have been confirmed. So I like the tough talk, but they're invertebrates until they prove otherwise. But what are your thoughts on this whole big budget busting bill? Why don't we start with you, Kurt, the status of where things are right now?
Yeah, I feel like Congress it's like the same hell loop. A proposal gets put out there, the same people hem and haw, complain about it, they whine, they bitch, they moan, and ultimately the thing gets passed somehow. It's like we actually haven't seen any evidence truly that over a long period of time, anyone in Congress is going to, on the Republican side, is going to actually stop one of President Trump's bills from becoming law. Like that hasn't happened in a real substantive way. Sure, there are procedural skirmishes. Sure, the rule may fail on the first vote, or it may have to get to a conference between the House and Senate. But like at the end of the day, these people do the same thing. They go out there, and it's always like the same 6 or 7 members, by the way, that are always out there like, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that. I'm a no vote on this, I'm a no vote on that. Well, they do the first vote, it fails. Headlines are written how embarrassing, humiliating it is for 24 hours, and then by 40 hours later, they vote it through. So I just don't see how the Republicans in Congress are going to tank the president's signature bill for his entire presidency. Like this is the one shot they have to really get anything done of this size, scope, scale, substance. They're not going to end up sabotaging it because, like I said, the things that they've already said yes to along the way are so, in my opinion, objectionable, and the unqualified people that they have greenlit to assume significant posts within this government, particularly at a time where we are in major international and economic turmoil. That just tells you like they don't really care. They're gonna say their piece so they could say they said their piece, and then ultimately they'll pass something.
So what do you think is the best case, worst case? And I mean that in terms of budget responsibility, not totally acquiescing to the president. What do you see in
There is no best case. It's only going to be the worst case.
So what is the least worst?
There's not going to be a fiscal responsibility in any of this.
Thank you.
They're not going to balance the budget. They're not going to lower the debt. They're not going to lower the deficit. It's going to end up adding trillions of dollars to the debt and deficit over the next 10 years. And because that's what Congress does every year.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I don't believe Dave. Well, first of all, I don't want taxes. I'm like totally fine with the tax bill raise being the same. I think that I don't want my taxes to go up, to be honest with you. I don't know if you two do, but I do think from some of the other issues, Kurt's exactly right. This is their only time. So just to kind of lay the groundwork here. So the bill came out this week on the Senate side. It was pretty different than the House's on some things that was a little bit shocking. The majority leader wants to start this process next Wednesday, a week from today, and then keep the Senate in over the weekend before July 4th to get it passed. So just think about that. So he's up against a recess week, and he's up against, these senators that have been in, I think this is the fourth week, it will be the fifth week. So they're like tired of each other. And so I think you see people flip-flopping now because they'll make their point, but then they won't sink this. What I'm really surprised about what came out today was the fact that the White House said that they want the House then to pass the Senate bill, this whole bill to be done by the August recess.
Mm-hmm.
I felt very strongly, I still feel very strongly, that if the Senate gets this done, if they really want the drama to stop, then the Speaker should keep the House in next weekend and just pass it and send people home. As soon as they send people home for the July 4th recess, these members are going to get killed by constituents over Medicaid, whatever the issue is. And it's going to be a much harder vote when they come back. I mean, just from a pure political perspective, it's going to be very difficult. So we'll see how that happens. I think the Speaker should leave the House in next week.
Well, it's an interesting thing, though. As far as the taxes go, and we talked about this previously, but I think Trump's instincts were right when he said, let the cuts expire. Because again, this is not a tax cut. It's a tax maintenance of the same rates. And
right.
if he let the so-called tax cuts expire, we're talking about raising it from 37 to 39.6. I mean, this is a minimal tax raise. And this argument, which is so ridiculous about, if we raise taxes, it's gonna curtail the job creators. I'm a small business owner, and the fact that I'm not going to hire more people because my tax rate is 39.6 as opposed to 37 is just inane. It shows how weak their argument is, that's the best one that they can put forward. So I disagree with that. I think they should let it go because it would take the wind out of so many Democratic sails. Everyone's got to pay their share. Now of course they want to cut Medicaid to give tax cuts to their billionaire buddies. So, but unfortunately in today's Republican Party, even a small tax adjustment is not possible. So we're going to have to live with it. And I think it is one of the things that, in my opinion, could hopefully sink the bill. But I don't know. What do you think, Kurt?
I mean, I just don't think anything's going to sink the bill.
I don't think anything sinks the bill.
And the reality is, though, it's like, anyone who talks about the budget and balancing it, it's like you have to, it is impossible. It's mathematically impossible to lower taxes.
The debt, remember before he ran the first time?
It's like you can't lower taxes, not make adjustments to entitlements, keep military spending above what it is, above baseline levels, all at the same time while having a balanced budget or being responsible for the debt. Like, that's not mathematically possible. Yeah. Like, everyone always likes to say, well, we need to get spending under control. We need to get, our debt under control, but they green light policies that make it literally impossible. And that's how intuitively, they're not going to sink the bill over this, because if they were really serious about getting our fiscal house in order, they would have the tough conversation about taxes. They would have the tough conversation about entitlements. They would be means testing Social Security. They would be means testing Medicare and Medicaid access. But no politician is going to ever be willing to do that because they know it would play poorly. So we will keep, dribbling along until the bomb goes off and these things become insolvent, and then we're just going to have austerity across the board.
Kurt, that's what scares me the most, and take the politics out of this 100%. Mm-hmm. Even the changes of Medicaid that are happening right now, the Senate was going to do some Medicare changes, and then that fell like a lead balloon. But how do we ever tackle entitlements? Because politically, unless you get a Democrat and Republicans, all of them to take the vote together.
Well, see, that
which will never happen.
Ashley, you just hit on the key. And by the way, I love it. It's like, well, we really have to cut spending, but we have to raise defense spending. We have this huge interest on the debt, and we can't cut entitlements. And the bottom line is the American people are largely responsible for this because everybody loves entitlements, and they don't care what the deficit or budget ramifications are. They want their entitlements. They feel
Right.
they
They don't
earned
care
their
about tomorrow as long as they get theirs today.
exactly.
Yeah.
And where you really saw this, a good example on a more micro level is in California, where we have this huge pension liability. Is true in a lot of states, right? Because when you think about it, pensions are perfect for politicians because it's the IBG, YBG. I'll be gone, you'll be gone when the bill comes due. So you get a benefit today without a clearly defined cost in the future. And when that clearly defined cost comes in the future, someone else has to deal with it. So it's just perfect political candy, right? And sure enough, the only solution was to get some of the current retirees to agree to give up some of their benefits, even a little bit, to help current retirees. Not a chance. Don't even talk to it. Ain't gonna happen. And so this is the thing. You're like, damn it, I paid into Social Security. I deserve it. And even I know I'm not gonna need Social Security. A lot of my friends are, but they feel, hey, I've earned it. I still should get it. So that even a lot of wealthy people that can afford it don't want means testing. So I agree, it's a real morass. But the other point I would make is that Obamacare was the reason that it was such a struggle was it was the first major legislation that wasn't passed bipartisanly. Congress is so broken, we forget the way things used to work. Every major bill was bipartisan because then the parties could give each other cover, right? It's just basic politics, but you don't see that now.
Was the
You
first
only
was Bush
succeed
tax
when your
cuts?
opponents fail.
Was Bush tax cuts? Wasn't that done in reconciliation?
Yes, but you have to remember, you had, I think, one of the great milquetoasts of all time, Max Baucus, who was the chairman of the finance committee at the time. And he said, oh, let's make it bipartisan, which of course was anathema to a lot of Democrats. But that's one of the reasons that the bill passed. But that still had, you look back, that still had a fair number of Republican votes. So I don't think they didn't need to do it through reconciliation because I can't remember if they did, but they had a lot of Democratic votes. That didn't happen at all with Obamacare, and it certainly wouldn't happen for any major legislation.
And then it just becomes so political. This is why I think that the whole process doesn't work well, because you get either bad policy or policy that becomes so toxic because it's not done by both sides.
Right.
And it becomes a political issue more than anything because it was done that way. Anyway, beating a dead horse here.
Oh, God, folks. Well, I think we're going to have to leave it at that. But one of these days we'll have some real positive things to talk about. There are. But a note to our viewers, our next presentation, we are going to be doing a town hall in where we all get together in person in Washington, D.C. on June 30th. So we very much hope you will join us for that. And it'll be nice to actually be sitting side by side with my comrades. But until then, I'm Dave Spencer, along with Ashley Davis and Kurt Bardella. Thanking you for joining us on Practically Political, and we will see you next time.
See you in DC.
Bye-bye.